The Meek Shall Inherit the Earth, a 5-part series by L.S. Larkey and Atlantean Astrology. Part 3. The Choice to Remain in Darkness. Central to Jesus' teachings is the call for individuals to seek spiritual illumination, to awaken to the absolute truth that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, an idea that transcends the material world and the systems of power that govern it. This path requires individuals to break free from mental and spiritual submission and to actively pursue the kingdom of heaven. In contrast to this call, the meek, those who are weak, submissive, and easily controlled, choose to remain in darkness. Rather than seeking the light of spiritual truth, they cling to the safety and security of the known world, following the rules of the land without questioning the deeper implications of their actions. This section will argue that the meek make a deliberate choice to reject the spiritual awakening that Jesus offers. By following the rules of the land rather than seeking the kingdom of heaven, they effectively choose to remain in spiritual blindness, bound to the material world and its limitations. Their failure to seek truth reflects a fundamental rejection of the freedom and enlightenment that Jesus' message offers. The radical call to spiritual awakening. Throughout his ministry, Jesus issued a radical call for individuals to awaken to the truth of God's kingdom. This awakening was not a passive process. It required an active engagement with the spiritual dimensions of life and a rejection of the worldly values that dominated society. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus exhorts his followers to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, emphasizing that spiritual truth must be prioritized above all else. Jesus' teachings consistently focused on the importance of breaking free from the structures of power, whether religious, political, or social, that kept people in bondage. The kingdom of heaven, as described by Jesus, was not just a distant, otherworldly destination, but a present reality that could be accessed by those willing to undergo personal and spiritual transformation. This transformation involved a rejection of the material world's temptations, a conscious choice to step outside of the systems that sought to control and subdue the human spirit. The radical nature of this call was not merely a challenge to external systems of power, but also a challenge to the internal state of the individual. Jesus sought to awaken people to the deeper truth of their existence, inviting them to shed the illusion of worldly power, wealth, and authority in favor of spiritual liberation. This awakening required individuals to confront their fears, to question the rules of the land, and to embrace the uncertainty of spiritual growth. In contrast to Jesus' call for spiritual transformation, the meek make a deliberate choice to remain in spiritual darkness. The meek are those who submit to worldly authority without question, who choose to follow the rules of the land rather than seeking the truth of the kingdom of heaven. They reject the call to spiritual awakening because it is too disruptive to their sense of security. They prefer the comfort of compliance to the challenges of enlightenment. This applies directly to the Pharisees and Jewish authorities who persecuted Jesus. Despite their deep religious knowledge, they followed the strict legalism of the Mosaic law, valuing rules over the radical spiritual transformation that Jesus was offering. The Pharisees were spiritually blind, bound to the legalistic interpretations of the law rather than the higher truths of love, justice, and spiritual enlightenment that Jesus embodied. They, too, were the meek, not because of humility, but because they followed the rules of the land without seeking deeper illumination. In his interactions with these leaders, Jesus often rebuked their blindness, not out of anger, but as a call to awaken. In Matthew 23, he condemned their hypocrisy, pointing out that they followed the rules without understanding the deeper meaning behind them. They were meek in the sense that they upheld the structures of the land, but in doing so, they rejected the spiritual freedom Jesus was offering. They could not see beyond the rules to recognize the Messiah in their midst. Even at the moment of his crucifixion, Jesus displayed compassion for the Roman soldiers who nailed him to the cross. His words, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," Luke 23:34, are profound because they reveal Jesus' recognition that the soldiers were also among the meek. The soldiers were simply following orders, adhering to the rules of the land, blind to the spiritual significance of their actions. Jesus' request for forgiveness on their behalf underscores the fact that they acted out of ignorance, not malice. Like the Pharisees, they were trapped in the cycle of submission to worldly authority, unable to see beyond their role as enforcers of Roman law. Jesus understood that both the Jewish authorities and the Roman soldiers were meek, because they were bound to the rules of the material world, unable to access spiritual truth. His compassion for them reflected his divine understanding that they were not truly evil, but spiritually ignorant, and that they would continue to reincarnate on earth, repeating their lessons until they awakened to the higher reality of the kingdom of heaven. Choosing the rules of the land. One of the most significant ways in which the meek reject spiritual illumination is by choosing to follow the rules of the land rather than the truths of the kingdom of heaven. The rules of the land refer to the societal, political, and religious structures that govern human behavior, often reinforcing the power of those in authority. These rules are designed to maintain order and ensure compliance, but they are not always aligned with the values of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus consistently challenged the rules of the land, calling into question the religious legalism of the Pharisees, the political oppression of the Roman Empire, and the social norms that upheld inequality and injustice. He urged his followers to look beyond the surface-level rules and to seek the deeper spiritual truths that lay beneath them. For Jesus, adherence to the rules of the land was not a pathway to righteousness. It was often a way of avoiding the difficult work of spiritual awakening. The meek, however, are content to follow these rules without questioning their legitimacy or morality. They submit to the status quo because it is easier than challenging it. They accept the authority of religious leaders, political rulers, and societal norms, without seeking to understand the deeper spiritual implications of their actions. In doing so, they remain bound to the material world, cut off from the spiritual truths that could lead them to the kingdom of heaven. The consequences of choosing to remain in spiritual darkness are profound. By rejecting spiritual illumination and choosing submission over enlightenment, the meek cut themselves off from the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' teachings make it clear that the kingdom of heaven is not a place for the weak or the passive. It is a realm for those who actively seek truth, who question authority, and who strive for spiritual liberation. The meek, by contrast, choose to remain bound to the material world, where power, control, and submission govern human existence. Jesus' statement that the meek shall inherit the earth takes on new meaning in this context. The earth represents the material realm, the domain of suffering, oppression, and impermanence. By choosing to follow the rules of the land, the meek inherit this world, but they do not transcend it. They remain trapped in the cycles of submission and suffering, unable to access the higher truths that lead to the kingdom of heaven. For those like the Pharisees and the Roman soldiers, inheriting the earth means that they will be reincarnated, returning to this world again and again until they learn the spiritual lessons they failed to grasp. Jesus' forgiveness of the Roman soldier at the cross, for instance, illustrates his recognition that these individuals act out of ignorance. They will continue to inherit the earth, reincarnating into new lives until they awaken to the light of divine truth. This cycle will repeat until they choose to seek true illumination and break free from the material realm. Spiritual awakening as the path to the kingdom of heaven. The path to the kingdom of heaven requires a deliberate choice to seek spiritual awakening. It is not enough to passively follow the rules of the land or to submit to worldly authority. True spiritual growth demands that individuals question the systems of power that bind them and actively pursue the truths of God's kingdom. Jesus' message was one of personal and societal transformation. He called for individuals to break free from the mental and spiritual chains that kept them in bondage and to embrace the freedom and light of the kingdom of heaven. This call was not limited to the religious elite or the socially privileged. It was a message for all who were willing to seek the truth. For those who choose spiritual awakening, the kingdom of heaven is not a distant dream, but a present reality. It is a state of being that transcends the material world, where love, justice, and truth reign supreme. It is a place of spiritual liberation, where individuals are no longer bound by the rules of the land, but are free to live in alignment with divine truth. The meek, however, reject this path. They choose to remain in submission, content to inherit the earth rather than the kingdom of heaven. They may live according to the rules of the land, but they will never experience the spiritual fulfillment that comes from awakening to the truth of God's kingdom. In conclusion, the meek make a deliberate choice to remain in spiritual darkness. They reject the call to spiritual awakening in favor of the comfort and security of worldly submission. By choosing to follow the rules of the land, rather than seeking the truths of the kingdom of heaven, they cut themselves off from the spiritual freedom that Jesus offers. Jesus' plea for their forgiveness also aligns with his broader teaching that God's mercy is extended to all, even to those who are deeply entangled in systems of power and submission to authority. In this light, Jesus' words can be seen as an invitation for spiritual awakening, signaling that even those complicit can be forgiven and redeemed through divine mercy once they come to understand the truth. The consequences of meekness are profound. The meek will inherit the earth through reincarnation, continuing to return to the material realm until they awaken to the higher spiritual truth that leads to the kingdom of heaven.